Nathaniel Sports Central, we go over a college football game preview and prediction on a big matchup coming up here in the Big 12 in Week 12 of this 2022 college football season. And it's going to be over the Oklahoma State Cowboys and the Oklahoma Sooners. Huge matchup for both these teams coming up here in Week 12. You got Oklahoma State, who is 7-3 on the season. This team at one point this season was considered a potential college football playoff contender, but since then they've lost 3 of their past 5. And they are just trying to get back on track as they take on the Sooners. In Oklahoma, they have very much disappointed this season as well. They're 5-5 on the season. This team isn't even bowl eligible as we head into the middle parts of November. And so this is a crucial game for both these teams here, and obviously it's a huge rivalry as well, so the stakes are high. We'll bring over a full game preview and prediction on this match for today, starting with your team trends. Oklahoma State beat Iowa State 20-14, so they're trying to get back on the right track, trying to string together a couple of wins here. And obviously that Iowa State team is not very good this season, but a win's a win for Oklahoma State at this point. And they're 7-3 on the season, 1-game winning streak. They obviously the week before lost to Kansas by almost or over 20 points there. They also got shut out to K-State the week before that. So it's been a tough go at it the past month or so for Oklahoma State. But as for OU, they lost to West Virginia on the road 23-20. That's a game that you just have to win if you're Oklahoma going on the road to a West Virginia team that's probably the worst team in the Big 12. I mean, that makes Oklahoma look like the worst team in the Big 12. Who would have thought at the beginning of the season we'd be saying that? But the Sooners, it's just been a disappointing, just a brutal season to say the least. But this is a big opportunity here for the Sooners. I mean, you're going up against your huge rival in Oklahoma State. The Cowboys have also had a bit of a disappointing season, but it's a huge game for both these teams. Games will be on Saturday, November 19th in Norman, Oklahoma. So the Sooners are the home team for this matchup, and it's in prime time, 6:30 p.m. Central. Spread's going Oklahoma by 7.5. So despite the Sooners being the team with the worst record in this matchup, they are favored by just over a touchdown. Over under 64.5, and the FPI is going to Oklahoma as well, 61.4%. Series history, Oklahoma leads at 90-19. So it's well known that Oklahoma has had a very successful history facing off against Oklahoma State, but the Cowboys did win last year's matchup, which was in Stillwater, but Oklahoma's won 8 out of the past 10. So in general, Oklahoma's had much more success in history, even though Oklahoma State did win last year's matchup. Stat comparison, Oklahoma State is a strong team on offense, defensively not so much. This team has allowed an average of 30 points a game. They are averaging 35. So this offense has done fairly good this season, but defensively they've dropped the ball a few times. Obviously to Kansas, allowing 37 to them. I mean, it just was a terrible game against Kansas State offensively. They didn't even score a point, and they allowed 48. And then if you look at the most recent matchup against Iowa State, they scored 20, which isn't ideal, but at least defensively, they were able to hold Iowa State to 14. So overall, just a very inconsistent team here in Oklahoma State. And honestly, both teams are just very inconsistent at this point. That's why this is a tough matchup to predict, is that you never know what team we're going to see out of both Oklahoma State and OU. But offensively, this team is strong in the passing game, averaging 284 pass yards. They're 23rd in the country in that category. They are 87th in rush yards a game. Then for yards allowed, they are second to last in pass yards allowed. This team is allowing nearly 300 pass yards a game. You're going up against an Oklahoma team that hasn't been extremely strong in the passing game. Dylan Gabriel has been the top passer, 2,200 yards, 16 touchdowns, 4 picks. Not a bad season. In fact, Dylan Gabriel and Spencer Sanders have got nearly identical stats. Dylan Gabriel does have a better completion rate, but both quarterbacks have 2,200 yards. Both quarterbacks have 16 touchdowns at this point, and both quarterbacks have got 4 or 5 interceptions. Spencer Sanders has 5 picks versus Gabriel, who's got 4. But nonetheless, I mean, it's just been a tough season for both these teams. Rushing-wise, Oklahoma has been a strong team in that category. They're 12th in the country there, with Eric Gray, who has rushed for 1,100 yards and 10 touchdowns on the season. And for yards allowed, Oklahoma is decent in the passing defense, but as for the rushing, they're 116th. They're allowing an average of 200 rush yards a game. So that is something to keep in mind here, is that Oklahoma is pretty strong in the rushing game. Oklahoma State is pretty weak all around defensively, and Oklahoma State's main strength is on offense is in the passing game, going up against an Oklahoma team that is stronger in the passing defense and defensive secondary. Recent matchups: Oklahoma State beat Iowa State 20-14, lost to Kansas, lost to Kansas State. They had that huge win over Texas, 41-34, and that brutal loss to TCU, 40-43 in double overtime. TCU, I feel like most of the Big 12 feels at this point. TCU, they're undefeated. They're 10-0 for a reason. This is a really good TCU team, but they've really caught a few big-time breaks this season, that is for sure. And I feel like TCU is starting to prove to me that they're for real, but I just don't know if they're as good as their record shows. If you look at the breaks that they've caught with injuries and all the above, it's just been a good season for TCU because of that. But both teams are definitely talented in comparison to TCU. But Oklahoma State, they came really close. It was in double overtime, but they in the end couldn't quite pull it out. But as for Oklahoma, they lost to West Virginia, lost to Baylor. Both losses were by 3 points. If you look at Oklahoma's matchup against TCU way back when as well, they got blown out to the Horned Frogs. That's really when TCU started to rise in the rankings there. They beat Iowa State 27-13, beat Kansas 52-42, and they lost to Texas 49-0. So both teams have gotten shut out at one point this season, and in general just have been very inconsistent. Key points for this one: Oklahoma State, at one point this season, they were a college football playoff contender. Those hopes have since, they're gone now. But, this is still a talented team here. The Oklahoma State, there's a reason why this team was expected to be such a good team. Same with Oklahoma. Both teams have got talent. It's just been a disappointing season. Defensively, Oklahoma State has struggled, but this is a chance for a much-needed significant win against your rival in Oklahoma. To beat them for the second straight year, that'd be a huge accomplishment. Plus, it gets you up to 8-3, which is not too bad of a record. And if you look at the Cowboys moving forward, your last matchup of the season is against a beatable West Virginia team. So you could definitely finish out the season with a 9-3 record, and who knows, you could sneak into the Big 12 title game if that's the case. Oklahoma at this point is completely out of Big 12 contention. They've fallen apart. They fell apart especially in weeks 4 through 6 when they got blown out to Texas, and just been a rough stretch. And then they won a couple of games, beat Kansas, beat Iowa State, but then lost 2 more close games to Baylor and West Virginia, 2 teams that are beatable. So it's just been a rough go at it for the Sooners, but they got the home field advantage here. They got a huge opportunity to knock off a talented Oklahoma State team, and in general, this is always a very significant matchup in college football when you got Bedlam, you got Oklahoma and Oklahoma State. It's going to be a shame when we don't get to see these two teams play each other, as Oklahoma heads off to the SEC, which doesn't look too good for the Sooners right now, being 5-5 in the Big 12. But we'll see how Oklahoma does. But it's definitely been a challenging season for the Sooners. The least thing that they can do is knock off the rival in Oklahoma State before they head off. But that said, let's get to the prediction here for Oklahoma State and Oklahoma coming up here in Week 12. And I'm going with the Sooners here. 38-31 is my predicted final score. I am going with Oklahoma to win this game, and it's going to be a close one. I expect it to be a higher scoring game, as it usually is, and the Sooners get the win 38-31. This is going to be a close one. Could go either way. I'll say 55% towards Oklahoma. Over under 64.5. I'll take the over, and Oklahoma State to cover the spread in the end, which is very close. Oklahoma's currently favored by 7.5, so that could change over the next few days. But as of right now, I do have Oklahoma State covering that spread. And I do think, even if it does change, as long as it's above 6, or as long as Oklahoma's favored by at least 6, I do want to take Oklahoma State to cover the spread. But over-under being 64.5, I'll take the over. We've seen some high-scoring shootouts between these two teams in recent history. I think this matchup is definitely one of those, but the Sooners get the win in the end, and a much-needed win because, if you look at the Sooners here at 5-5, there's a chance. If you lose this game, you go on the road to Texas Tech next week. It's a tough road. So, for Oklahoma, this is a crucial game that you want to have to get up to at least 6 wins, at least get to a bowl game, or else this team could be in danger of missing a bowl game, which is something that honestly would have been stunning if you would have known that in the preseason. But that's it. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below on this matchup, and I appreciate you guys watching as always. Stay tuned for more from All Sports Central. Catch you on the next one.